2009, a group of undergraduate, graduate, and veterinary students got together informally to discuss the growing disconnect between the public and agriculture. The result was the creation of Food for Thought, a grassroots group of K-State students and young alumni looking to bridge this gap. The average consumer is 2 generations removed from the farm. As a result, interest in where food comes from and how it is produced is rapidly growing among consumers of all backgrounds. Food for Thought believes it is our mission to provide our peers and community members with accurate, factual information about agriculture and to provide opportunities to discuss food production. In addition to bringing speakers to campus, Food for Thought maintains a social media presence via Twitter, Facebook, and a blog, and partners with agricultural organizations across Kansas to promote agriculture to audiences throughout the state. In 2010, Food for Thought hosted a lecture with world-renowned animal behaviorist Dr. Temple Grandin. It was announced at that event that Dr. Grandin was the first in a series of speakers in the new Dr. Dan Upson Lecture Series. Dr. Upson taught in Kansas State's College of Veterinary Medicine and the Department of Animal Science for 35 years before retiring in 1994. Dr. Upson has received several awards for his outstanding dedication to the classroom and the veterinary profession. When you think of Kansas State's history in agriculture and veterinary medicine, nobody has had a bigger impact on teaching students than Dr. Dan Upson. He has made numerous contributions throughout his years of teaching on our campus and continues to work in the beef industry and veterinary profession in the state and beyond. The Upson Lecture Series recently became fully endowed thanks to the generous donations of the KSU Vet Med class of 62 and 66. Tonight's event is also sponsored in part by Elanco. Please join me in thanking these generous contributors. Wendy Bilberry, Food for Thought's Upson Lecture Series chair, to come to the stage and introduce our guests.
Good evening. It is our pleasure to have Mr. Vance Crowe as our fall 2015 installment of the Upson Lecture Series. Vance Crowe is the Director of Millennial Engagement at Monsanto in St. Louis, Missouri. Vance is a former communications strategist for the World Bank Group, a returned U.S. Peace Corps volunteer stationed in Kenya, a former communications coordinator at a national public radio affiliate in Northern California, and was a deckhand on an ecotourism ship that traveled in the Western Hemisphere. Vance holds an undergraduate degree in communications from Marquette University and a master's degree in cross-cultural communications from Seton Hall School of Diplomacy. Tonight, he will be presenting a message entitled Crossing Over the Mountain, Understanding Memes and Networks to Outcompete the Fear of Modern Agriculture. We will follow his presentation with time for questions and answers. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mr. Vance Crowe.
Wow, so when I first sat down here tonight, the auditorium was empty, and I kind of half expected it to be empty as we started, but this is quite the crowd. Maybe as we get started, I can get a little bit of a perspective on the people that are here. How many people here are with the Ag College? Wow, all right, so pretty substantial. How many are from outside the Ag College? Okay. How many of you are professors or teachers in some way here? And how many of you are here because you're getting extra credit? All right. That's great. So I'm going to start, but before I do, I thought that I would probably let you know that despite the fact that there are 350 people in here, there is one person that makes this a really difficult, nerve-wracking speech. And it's because her name is Dr. Lisa Canizet, and she is there. She's a scientist at Monsanto. And what you would find out once you've worked at Monsanto for a little while is the absolute toughest grader on the planet is a scientist from Monsanto when you're giving a presentation about Monsanto. So she is here because if we get technical questions or if anybody wants to talk about breeding or biotechnology at the end of this, I wanted to make sure that we had somebody that had deep expertise. Because when I came to Monsanto, I am actually not there because I have a deep agricultural background, and I'm not a scientist. But I do have what is likely the most awkward job title on the face of the planet, Director of Millennial Engagement for Monsanto. And I don't know what all of you guys were expecting when I came here, if you thought that I would be wearing skinny jeans and listening to Taylor Swift as I walked in. But that is not at all what Monsanto intended when they began a position, when they opened up a position called the Director of Millennial Engagement. And what I thought I would do tonight would be to tell you a little bit about the position. Why does Monsanto need a position like this? Why did they choose to do this? Why did I personally take this position? And then I want to go through what I think is a new way to think about how ideas spread so that they stack up to become culture. And we'll do this kind of in a light and more informal way, and I'll try and finish with plenty of time that you can ask questions. And those questions, as you're listening to me speak, can range from what we're talking about here tonight on the presentation, or it can range out into other questions about Monsanto in general, or about modern agriculture. I want this to be as open of a conversation as possible, and I am so privileged to stand on the stage with that Dr. Temple Grandin has spoken on. And I went back and looked at some of the other speakers that have been here for the Upson Lecture Series, and I recognize just how valuable your time is. So I will try and make it as valuable as I can to talk about things that matter and things that you can use for yourselves. When we think about why would Monsanto have a position called the Director of Millennial Engagement, maybe we can take a step back. And that's to say, Monsanto for a very long time has strictly viewed itself as selling seeds and technology to farmers. And the way that you become one of the best in the industry is that you develop a culture, a deep culture, of going out and speaking to your customers and understanding on a very deep level what are the challenges that they're facing year in and year out. And what are the ways that we can offer, go back and use science and technology to develop new solutions to those problems that they're willing to pay for because it delivers them an opportunity to grow food more bountifully with less inputs. We have a deep culture of knowing how to talk to our farmer customers. Another side of it is Monsanto is a publicly traded company, and a lot of people are surprised when they find out, I know that I was when I came, that Monsanto is considered one of the most transparent companies in all of Wall Street. We go out and tell our investors exactly what technologies are in the pipeline. We tell them about what problems we're having. When we have decided we're not going to move something forward, we go out and tell them. We have earned a reputation for knowing how to talk with Wall Street. And those are two very far apart poles. And as a company, they said, if we are talking to this pole and this pole, and we're doing a really good job of it, then we're doing our job. But what they forgot is that in between those two poles are hundreds of millions, really billions, of consumers that are eating and using the fiber and using fuel from the seeds that we create. And we did not take an active role in going out and talking with consumers because we thought we go talk to farmers or we go talk to investors, but somebody else will go out and talk to the public. And what we discovered, or what Monsanto discovered prior to becoming there, is that these conversations were going to go on whether we were there or not. And so, after many years of, I think I can say pretty objectively, sticking their head in the sand and hoping that problem would just go away, Monsanto has woken up. And they have said, we are going to do whatever we can do to become the transparent company that goes out and answers tough questions and is around to say, this is what we think of agriculture and where we fit into this much larger system. My role was considered part of that. Now, when we talk about it being the Director of Millennial Engagement, I don't actually care at all about how old you are. You know, if we go look on Wikipedia, it'll be like, you know, the ages between 1980 and 2000, those are the millennials, go after those, right? You hear all these marketing campaigns, and you hear about PR firms, and oh, the millennials, they're the important ones, blah, blah. I don't care about that at all. When we talk about millennials, the way that we think of it is, every generation hits a tipping point where a new way of thinking is beginning to diffuse into society, and things are about to change. And this happens with every generation, and the millennial term is just that. There is a new way of thinking that is starting to diffuse into culture, and my job is to figure out where are those people that are creating the new world that is coming about, and where are those ideas just about to crest into society. And those are the places that we will go to figure out who is it that we should be talking to, what do they want to talk about, where are they, and when our company shows up, who should show up to answer questions? Should it be our breeders? Should it be our geneticists? Should it be our seed salesmen? Should it be our attorneys? Who should show up to be a part of these conversations? And so my job is to figure out where those ideas are diffusing and help us develop that same culture that we've developed on talking to farmers and talking to Wall Street, we want to develop with talking with consumers because we've been failing at it for a very long time. But the question then maybe becomes, why would I take this role, right? Why did I choose to take this job with a company that oftentimes when you go out, you are met with a lot of distrust, fear, and sometimes anger. And so I thought before I went through this presentation, I would tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up with a problem that many of you have that maybe our parents don't often understand. For the first time in human history, we have millions of people that have almost no concern about where their food will come from or will I have shelter. Right? We know that it will be there. We have such a developed society that our parents gave us a gift that almost every day. I was told all of the time growing up, Vance, you can grow up to be anything that you want to be. And really, when you think about that, my parents feel such great joy. They didn't have those options. They see it as offering me a coliseum of doors that I could go walk through any one of them, right? But every time when I was in college that I would start taking a step towards one of those decisions, oh, I'm going to go be this, instead of being excited about the door that I was getting closer to, I heard all these other doors slam shut, and so I became paralyzed. I didn't know what I wanted to be. Because the challenge that comes with being able to grow up to be whatever it is that you want to be means that the only way that your life is going to have value is if you go make a difference in the world, is if you go change the world and make it better. How many people in this room feel a deep pull to go out and make a difference in the world? This is not true all over the world. If you go ask that question to other people, they don't have this challenge. And I had that challenge and went off to school and didn't really know what I wanted to be, but I wanted to study communications. And I remember I got an internship the last semester of my senior year. And I chose this internship because it was the PR firm that had been hired to work on behalf of a small town that was going to keep this big, bad industry out that they didn't want in there. And so I was so excited. I took this internship, and I worked nights, and I worked weekends, and I worked all the time that I could, all of my energy, because I was so excited that we were fighting on behalf of this small town. And I remember the day as an intern that I was called into the office, you know, the one with the long table where it's really shiny, and I bring in my papers and I sit down at my desk, and it's going to be my turn at the table with all the executives around there. It's going to be my turn to present to them what I've been working on, and right as I'm about to go into the presentation, the owner of the company says, Vance, do you know what's funny about this customer? And I said, no. And he goes, what's funny is the other side, the big bad industry, approached us first. But the reason that we're working for these guys is because they wrote us the check first. And I don't know about you, but I was broken by that. Because I had no idea that the people that I was surrounded by weren't working for a cause, they were working for a paycheck. And I'll be honest, that's a reality, right? That people need to make money, but it wasn't what I was going to do. And And so I left that internship. I finished it up, but I didn't know what to do with myself, and so I jumped on as a deckhand on a ship. And I started traveling around the world, and I got to see all kinds of amazing people and places, but that's another story. Ultimately, I discovered that I didn't just want to travel to go see people in interesting places. I wanted to go live among people that had problems, and I wanted to help. And I remember thinking at the time that the problems of people far away were way more important than the problems of the people here. And so, I did everything I could to join the Peace Corps. And my mother is fond of saying that my Spanish that I studied so hard in college was so good that the Peace Corps decided to send me to Kenya. So I find myself in a culture I know nothing about, among people that I've never met. But I'm there because I want to help and I want to do good things in the world. And so I take a training course, and I'm there and I'm living with the family and I'm studying the language and I'm starting to figure out what some of the challenges are, and I get put in my site, which is up in the mountains. It's above where the pineapples were grown, but not quite as high as where tea is grown. And there's a small village there. And I don't know how many of you have had a chance to go to sub-Saharan Africa, but things are starting to come alive there. Things are starting to happen. A civilization that has been living in poverty and without industrialization is just starting to get going. And I was living in a town that originally I was there to do water sanitation, do things like dig wells or help them build latrines. But I discovered after being there for not very long, that they actually had a much bigger problem than water. Malaria had come to this town. And it's because roads were starting to come. So originally, back just 10 years before, if a person got malaria and they were at the bottom of the mountain, by the time they walked up even partway to the village, they were so sick that they couldn't continue. So this little village had been protected from malaria, but modernization had made it so you could get malaria down the mountain, hop in a truck, and be up in your town, where now mosquitoes could spread that disease. And so I'm there and I'm recognizing that the people living in this town, they don't have running water or electricity, so they certainly don't have microscopes or biology courses. They have no idea how malaria is spread. They had no way of knowing that it's the female Anopheles mosquito that only comes out between the hours of 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., and if they were able to cover their babies with long sleeves and have bed nets that they covered in a certain type of insecticide, that they could have prevented malaria. They didn't know. Before I came there, they had thought maybe it's from standing in the rain or from sleeping under mango trees. They didn't know, and it wasn't their fault for not knowing. And so there I was. I found a problem that I could help solve, and I felt great about it. The people that had invited me into their village were wonderful people, and they were so open to whatever it was that I was there to offer. And so I was there teaching them the science behind how to prevent malaria. And I was drawing stick figures, and I was showing them about the mosquito and how it hops and what you can do to prevent it. And I loved it. I loved my village that I was living in. And every day, around 3 or 4 o'clock, what would happen is everyone would gather in the market. And the reason this is if you've ever been to a subsistence village, what you find is people, mostly women and girls, who have spent their entire day leaned over like this, pulling weeds out of the ground, or trying to find insects and dispersing them, have just a few plants left that their family isn't going to eat, maybe tomatoes, for example, that they can't put them in refrigeration or send them off somewhere else, so they gather whatever tomatoes they aren't going to eat that night, and whatever tomatoes are going to go bad the next day, they gather them up and they go to the market, and they all sit around in a giant square, and they put their goods out, and they sit there, and they hope that someone will walk by and buy whatever tomatoes they have, maybe 10 or 11 tomatoes. But this was actually a wonderful time. This is a time of community, right? And so these people would gather together, and everyone would come there to talk, and you would see people that you knew, and everybody would be hanging out. I like to hang out with this guy named Moses, who built furniture. And one day, Moses and I are standing off to the side, just kind of chatting, and a man walked into town. Now in Kenya, when men travel, they wear suits. That's not uncommon to see a man in a suit. But this man's suit was particularly well pressed and very clean. And he was carrying a box about this big. And he took that box as he walked into town, and he walked straight into the center of that market, and he set that box on the ground, and he stepped up on top of it. And he said, "My brothers and sisters, bow your heads and pray." And everyone in this very devout community stopped what they were doing, and they put their heads down. And he said a small prayer. And as soon as he was done, he pops back up, and he says, "My brothers and sisters, I am here after traveling for many, many years. You see, my wife and my daughter were killed by the scourge of malaria. And when that happened, I left my home, I left my shamba, my garden, and I went wandering. And I wandered over mountains and through streams, looking for what could have possibly saved them, because I felt such a great loss in my life, until one day I came across a monk standing by a fountain. And the monk looked deep into my eyes, and he saw how much pain I was in. And so he gave me these little vials right here." And he pulled one out of his pocket. And he said, "If I had only had this little vial, I could have opened it up and poured it into my wash basin with my family, and if we had prayed over it and then washed ourselves, we would not have gotten malaria. And so I'm here to offer this to you, and I'm sorry, my brothers and sisters, I'm going to have to charge 500 shillings for it so I can keep spreading this around. It funds my travel." Now I'm sitting over here with Moses, and I'm listening to this, thinking 500 shillings? That's 2 full days of back-breaking work in the sub-Saharan sun. Brutal work. There's no way. And then I'm also kind of sitting over there with a chuckle on my face saying, "Buddy, you came to the wrong town. Because I brought science here." But to my horror, everyone in that market found a way to get that man on the box 500 shillings. He earned their trust, and they sold it to them. And I remember watching, horrified, just over here, not knowing what to do, being 22, 23 years old. Shortly after that, I got very sick. I didn't stop the man on the box, and even worse than that, I got sick. It turns out, just as an aside, the mango family is the same family as the poison ivy family, and it turns out, if you're hyper-allergic to poison ivy, you should not eat mangoes by the spoonful. So I ended up getting really, really sick. I didn't know that about the poison ivy anyway, and had to come home. But that left a lasting impression on me. I knew at that time that whatever I did in the world, no matter what, I wanted to fight the man in the box. And so I did a bunch of other things. I found a job working at an NPR affiliate station in Northern California, where there were people that, when they thought Berkeley, they thought, "Man, that place is way too conservative for me. I need to go somewhere where I can breathe free," right? But they're good people up there, and they're trying to find new ways to grow their food. They're trying to come up with new ways to think about problems. And I got to meet and work at a radio station, and I got to learn about some of the things that they were afraid of. And then I ultimately went on to graduate school, where I studied cross-cultural negotiations, because I wanted to learn how is it that people can get along in really complicated and, frankly, really aggressive situations. And I ended up going to work for the World Bank, and I remember when I was there thinking, this will be the place that I can make the biggest difference. But it wasn't. It wasn't a place that was selling solutions into the market. It wasn't a place where people were building things, and frankly, it moved too slow for me. I want to be solving problems right now. And so I left it, and I moved to St. Louis, and I started up a small communications company. And a long story short, one day, Monsanto has a position that came open. Now, I had heard all of these things that many people have heard about Monsanto. I think the ones that maybe you've heard as well. And I really didn't believe them very much, but I also wasn't interested at all in a job at Monsanto. But I did want to see inside of this really dark place, right? I imagined before I came to Monsanto that it was some 30-story building with large storm clouds gathering around it, and everybody there wearing black suits and Matrix-style sunglasses, right? That's the way that I imagined it. And so when I had an opportunity to interview for the job, I thought, yeah, I'd like to see that. And so I took the interview, and when I got there, I was completely, first of all, I thought I was lost, and then crestfallen when I found out it's actually a campus. It looks just like a college campus with a little fountain and 2-story buildings. And when I get to the front door, instead of being greeted by these people that look like they're in the Matrix, I was greeted by a woman in a sweater with a ponytail that said, "Come on in." And I was like, this is not what I was hoping for. And so I do the interview, and I can remember I'm in these like regular conference rooms with whiteboards on them, and I'm trying to look to see, is there secret writing there somewhere? What's going on here? But I was just doing the interview because I wanted to see what was on the inside, and so I didn't really care. I just told them, I think you need to be way more transparent. I think you need to go answer really tough questions, the things that I'm sure many of you would come up with if you were giving advice to Monsanto. And we get all the way to the end of the interview, and the woman that had the ponytail with the sweater, she goes, "Now, we're done with the interview. Do you have any questions for me?" And I was like, yeah. How are you going to train somebody to be the director of millennial engagement for Monsanto? And she goes, I would do it differently depending on who we end up hiring. But for you, what I would do is I would line up a list of 50 people from throughout the company. Scientists, seed breeders, geneticists, farmers, seed salesmen, attorneys, advertisers, people from throughout the company, and I'll have you meet with them for an hour. When you're done, you come talk with me, and I'll ask you questions, and we'll figure out what you don't know, and then we'll write another list of 50 people. Well, I'm now on about my 7th list, because I took that job because, to me, this was the greatest opportunity that I will ever be able to find, at least right now, to work on a problem that is so critically important to the world that it cannot be ignored. Because people have been made to fear this company, that they have these ideas that maybe the motives of the people on the inside aren't okay, or that somehow the science doesn't tell us that this is the way that we should move forward. And so I had the opportunity to run inside of the company and go ask and explore and investigate. And if I found something nefarious and evil and brought it to people and they didn't change it, I guarantee you I will walk out and write one hell of a book. But if what I find is that the memes that are out there, that Monsanto is not this dark place that people should be afraid of, well, then I have an opportunity to go help and make sure that the methods of modern agriculture that allow people to move away from a lifetime of pulling weeds out of the ground, and we can get the technology to them that will allow more food to be grown bountifully and safely and preserve as much of the environment as possible. And so that is what I have found. And what I'm here today to talk with you about is how ideas get compressed into that. How is it that fear allows people to compete? And what is it, if you want to go out and change the world, what advice I have for you? So maybe we can spend a little bit of time going through this presentation. If it'll move forward. So the shape of the problem. For hundreds of thousands of years, human beings spend 80% of their energy and of their time looking for calories, looking for food. And what I mean when I say that, searching for that, they were looking for berries that they may be able to forage, or maybe some mushrooms out in the woods. Maybe they could club an animal. But they were also using rocks, and sometimes their fingers, to dig in the dirt, hoping that they would be able to pull out a root that they could gnaw on, and that would sustain them. Hundreds of thousands of years, most of the existence of human beings spent their lives that way. And it wasn't until about 12,000 years ago when people figured out, wait a second, if we take the seeds that are in some of the fruits that we like, we can put them in the ground and we can protect them, and it requires less energy for us to put these in the ground and cultivate and protect them than what it costs than what we get back. This is a more efficient way of doing it. And then they started figuring out, if you take the bushy plant from this one that has a big seed pods, and the bushy plant from this one that has even bigger seed pods, and you shake them together, the resulting child gets bigger. Suddenly you've developed plant breeding. And slowly, over time, we start watching, as people get more efficient, as the agriculture gets better around cities, you don't need as many people pulling weeds and fighting bugs. And they're able to leave that farm, and they're able to walk into the city and start applying their energies towards other things, towards other innovations. You can see just how quickly people moved into cities. So much so that when I show this presentation, not to a room full with ag students, most of them could not identify with any of these problems. Right? They have no idea what the corn rootworm is, or how bad a field of Palmer amaranth can destroy a combine or make harvesting almost impossible, or truly that plants can get sick with fungus or disease, or just how serious drought is. They've been away from it for so long that they have no connection with it whatsoever. And so this is the time when I often tell about an experience that I had when I came to Monsanto. How many of you have ever been to a farm progress show? Anybody in here? The first time that I went to one, it was while I was working for Monsanto, and I stepped inside of the John Deere booth. And there was a guy standing there, and he kind of noticed that I was a little bit green there, didn't really know what I was doing because I don't come from agriculture. And he said, "Come over here." And he had me walk over to a stand where there was a sprayer. And he said, "Here, stick your hand under that sprayer." And so I did, and he turned on the water. And he had me pull my hand back, and he said, "Now look at your hand." And I put my head up close to it, and I could see the little mist-fine drops. And then he hands me a towel, and I dry it off, and he says, "Now put your hand under there again." And he turns a knob, and this time, instead of it being a fine mist, it's drips, and they come out. And he says, "Pull your hand out." And so I do, and now I see slightly larger drops. And he says, "That's how far agriculture has come. We now engineer the size of the droplets so that way, anytime we put chemicals out there, we put them on so that the least amount that we can use, so that the plant can get at it as easy as possible." And in that moment, I have that tangible, that visceral experience that, my God, there is a lot of science and technology, and this is fascinating, and people know nothing about it. But that's just how far the innovations that have come that allow people to live in cities. These are some rather standard graphs. Have you guys seen these before? This right here is the amount of land that used to be required to grow a bushel of corn. And it doesn't show up very clearly there. It's the early 1900s. By the 1940s, it's lower. This third box is modern day. All the way down here is our prediction in just 10 to 15 years. This is amazing. We're able to grow vastly more crops on far smaller land. This enables us to use that land for things that are completely different from agriculture or feed more people. And everybody here has heard that statistic that there's going to be 9 billion people. We have to get better at growing this, and we are. And rather than feeling excited and proud of these advancements, modern agriculture is in a position of being defensive. We're always saying, no, it's not that bad. But this is an unimaginable feat that our forefathers could never dream of. Not that long ago, they were hunting for berries. And this is one of my favorite graphs. This is it's just right at 1900. Over 40% of the population lived and worked on farms in agriculture. And you watch the slope of that line fall all the way down to less than 2% of the entire population lives or works on farms. All of those other people, when they were able, as advancements came along and they were able to put down their tools and they walked into the city, imagine that the dust that fell off their shoes, this is the last time they went and worked on the farm, built up. And now there is a mountain, because all of those people live in the city and now they're away from their farms. And there are people inside of the city that have realized just how far apart people are from those farms. And so they're willing to get up on boxes and they're willing to tell stories that make people feel like they should trust them or that it's the right answer, and they're believing that something is going on the other side of the mountain. Oh, that last one, this is juxtaposing the amount of bushels that we've been able to grow of corn, but you can put this on many other crops. So that man on the box, he uses a concept that we talk about. How many of you have heard the concept of memes? Now, how many of you know where that term came from? The term memes comes from Richard Dawkins, an evolutionary biologist who in the 1970s wrote a book called The Selfish Gene. And that book was designed to teach people of the 1970s how natural selection works, how animals compete in order to have evolution occur, right? So we can imagine an experience where there are rabbits out in the world, right? Lots and lots of rabbits, and suddenly they're all brown, right? But one rabbit, just randomly, around the month of November, has some genetic mutation that they turn white. And when they turn white in the winter, suddenly they aren't getting eaten when the snow falls and they're not standing out in brown, right? You know about this. This is something common we're all pretty aware of. What Richard Dawkins says is that ideas function like genes. That what happens with all ideas is that they are compressed so that people can understand very complicated things and they're able to be shared. So imagine we're back 100,000 years ago. And you have tribes of people roaming around. They don't have the scientific method. They have no way of understanding what causes the rains to come or what causes certain plants to grow in the way that they do. They don't know. But in those tribes, they have a leader that pops up. And the leader says, hey, everybody, the way that we ensure that we're going to have a great hunt is every morning we are going to do a ritual to the east so that as the sun comes up, the sun is happy with us. And every night, we're going to do a ritual to the west as it goes down. And that's how we'll ensure that we'll have a good hunt, because the sun god will be pleased. Right? And if things go well, then they give high fives all around. Hey, good job. Everybody did the ritual correctly. And if things don't go well, then they say, who didn't do the ritual hard enough? But now imagine in that same tribe, a new leader pops up, a new mutation. And he says, guys, you're doing it all wrong. What the sun god demands is that you splash water on your hands and your face and your feet before you do the ritual in the morning and right when you go to bed at night. And what they don't realize is suddenly these people don't get sick as often. Their children live longer. They have better access to food. They start thriving. The people that live in that tribe with that leader do better and they thrive. Not because they understand the intricacies of washing their hands, but because there is an idea that has been compressed that they can share and they can understand. Those are memes. It doesn't matter how accurate those things are. It's if that gives a group of people a way to outcompete an older way of thinking, and then it's worth sharing, right? But you're probably wondering, or maybe many of you are thinking about maybe memes that look a little more like that. Is that right? So, overly attached girlfriend up there, she's got, I sewed my name on your shirt in case you forget you're taken, right? What's going on there? What is she doing? You've got the other guy down there. It's good guy Greg, knows you're nervous during a presentation, smiles and nods, hint, 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 as you're presenting. What's going on here, right? These are kind of funny. We all chuckle. You know who those two people are. You instantly identify, I should not be anything like her. And you also know, if I want to be like that guy, the cool guy in class, I should read those. This is the internet's way of spreading ideas. You don't have to know the complex intricacies. It's compacting a whole lot of information, and it's allowing human beings to share ideas very, very quickly. These are memes because they help you to compete. They help you not to be an obnoxious girlfriend or to be the good guy Greg. Who here, go ahead and shout it out, knows what most people think of that top one? GMOs, right? Because people have gone out there and they know, there was some crazy statistic I read about I won't cite it because we're on live streaming, about the number of people that are afraid of syringes is actually higher than the number of people that are afraid of public speaking. So if you're able to link those two things, GMOs and syringes, then suddenly you have attached fear into that, and you're making people say, stay away from this. This is not something that I feel comfortable with. They don't have to know about the science. They don't have to know about how precise it is or how much research goes into it. They've been made to feel afraid. The logo down below, USDA Organic, many of you in the ag schools probably know and understand that organic still uses chemistries, pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, but many people on the outside have compressed the wrong meaning into it to mean that this means it's safer than other things, right? That somehow this is more pure or more luxurious. That seal right there and others like it, those are memes. They are sharing, they're compressing information, and they're making it possible for people to share it, whether it's right or wrong. But maybe we should think a little bit about why did that organic meme become so powerful? There's nothing wrong with growing your food organically. It's choosing to stand on one side of the line with what products you'll use. If you on your farm want to grow that way, go ahead. But the thing that people don't often understand is how did that become so popular? Well, the very first people that were buying it were living in cities, in high-dense areas, with high incomes and time to be able to go to special stores, and they were being hyper-conscious about what they ate. So suddenly they're eating a lot more produce, and they're counting their calories, and they're probably doing also a number of other things that make them healthy. So when people on the outside started watching it, they could say the people that eat organic, they look the way that I want to look. They care about food in the way that I want to care about food. That's not wrong if it encourages people to eat more fruits and vegetables. It's wrong if people are compressing fear into that meat. But no one's going to listen to the guy from Monsanto go out and say that. So what I'm here to talk about is what are other ways that you can think about memes. This final one over here, the woman on the top there is a woman named Vandana Shiva. That's quoting, you cannot insert a gene you took from bacteria into a seed and call it life. You haven't created it, you have instead polluted it. She's not talking about scientific facts. She's not talking about how they were regulated or anything. She is just saying, this is polluted. And for people that find the other things that she talks about, right, she's a very recognizable figure. So maybe she says 9 things that you really agree with, and when she slides that one in there, maybe you don't really have a big gate on for why you shouldn't think that way. This other one down here, I don't know if you guys saw this meme. It was talking about what's hidden in your pumpkin spice latte. right? This is, if you tell anyone, you want to try a funny trick, it's actually not that funny. Set a glass of water down in front of a person and look at it as they go to drink it, right? We're primed to react to fear. So if somebody says, there's something hidden in your pumpkin spice latte, your brain is going to tell you, I'm just probably going to avoid that, right? Those memes are powerful, and they cannot be advertised away. The only way that a new gene gets better out in the wild is if it outcompetes the other genes. The same is true of memes. How do memes spread? Well, just the same way that genes spread. Imagine you have a speaker that goes out and talks with 3 different people. They all hear the same message. Some of these people are going to be like, oh, I went home and I told 2 of my friends and they really liked it too. Some of them are going to go out and tell all their friends and get out online and tell their friends to tell people. But some people are going to do something. Has anybody in here ever heard of a guy named Joel Salatin? Joel Salatin is a very interesting character. He wears big overalls and cowboy hats, and he talks to crowds about what's wrong with modern agriculture and what he sees is wrong about it. And dynamic speaker, he's fascinating if you watch him on YouTube. And one of the things that he'll say is, if you hear one of my ideas and it doesn't think like it's going to resonate with your customers, well then just put it in the fermenter, shake it up, and let something new come out, right? What he's saying is, I'm not going to give you the advertising campaign to make your thing the most competitive. Mutate that thing. Make it different from what I'm saying, but make it work for your people. And the reason that I bring this up is that the challenge that Monsanto faces with people being afraid of modern agriculture is not just our challenge, it's your challenge too. And that there is no way that any group of people, no matter how creative they are, can sit in a boardroom and come up with some advertising campaign that's going to convince everyone that it's just okay to use GMOs. That's not going to happen. And the way that people are spreading fear into the system is that they work like Palmer amaranth. How many of you are familiar with Palmer amaranth? Palmer amaranth grows to be 8 to 10 feet tall. And it is one of the first weeds to become resistant to an herbicide. And the way that it does that is that 8 to 10 foot tall plant holds 200,000 seeds on it. But its special trick is that the seeds have tons of variation in their genes in between them. They're not all one type of genetic composition. They have lots of mutations. So when those spread out and are sprayed out by the wind, then there is a better and better chance that they are going to be the one that finds resistance to that herbicide. That's what Joel Salatin is saying. That's what people that are putting fear out into the system are doing, is they're saying, don't wait for a boardroom solution. Just keep coming up with new ideas, and when you find one that makes people afraid, just keep doing it over and over and over and over again. This is a tweet that I sent on a Sunday morning. I was coming downstairs, and I saw my dog laying on the couch. I pushed it off, I sat down, and I was looking at this graph here, which is wild. I wrote broccoli on there. I was later told by a Monsanto plant breeder that it's wild cabbage. I had no idea that wild cabbage is what we get. Cabbage, Brussels sprouts, kale, broccoli, cauliflower, they all come from that one single plant, the Brassica oleracea family. I was so surprised by that I just put it up on Twitter and said, that surprised look on your face when you show somebody that broccoli didn't occur in the wild, humans bred it. And that thing spread way out, right? That didn't come from a boardroom or an advertising campaign. That came from me saying, gosh, I love this. This is so interesting. I bet other people would like it. I never imagined that nearly 1 million people would see it. So one of the things that I talk about is if you're going to go out and try and outcompete other ideas, some of the things that we have learned is that there are 3 characteristics that will make a meme competitive. The first thing is that it's educational. We as human beings are designed to love learning. We want to know what these new facts are. There's a reason when BuzzFeed gives that like little teaser on it where you only get part of it and you're like, I just have to know and I'm willing to click on it and give you advertising dollars to find the answer to what the 3 best cities are, whatever it is. But the educational is key. People want to learn. The second thing is that it needs to be surprising. When something surprising happens, your brain gets a little dose of dopamine and it makes you feel happy. And so if you can give people things that are both educational and surprising, they will enjoy that, they'll like it. But if you want them to spread it, the thing that they must do is say, by sharing this, it represents who I am, where I come from, who I agree with. People will never share ideas that they don't think reflect well on their personal selves. And I don't have a great way to describe that. Right up here I use this shows allegiance. See, this photo up here, that's a mannequin, in case anybody wonders if I took a photo of a naked woman. But, and what that is I had gone to a sustainability conference. And I was sitting next to a farmer that was sitting next to a woman complaining about the food system. And he asked her, the farmer said, ma'am, you can come out to my farm anytime you want. You can take a look at it, but what is it that you're looking for? And the woman said, I just wish that we could go back and eat the way that the Native Americans did. And at first I laughed about that, but then I got kind of sad and upset, and I started to realize that the reason that people don't think that is because the memes in their head are that time was idyllic. And so this is a tweet, you can't read it very well. It said something like, so wholesome, no chemicals, just the joy of spending every day, all day, for the rest of your life pulling weeds. And that thing took off like wildfire, particularly around Silicon Valley. But that's going out and showing people in a way that fulfills those 3 criteria. And finally, as we kind of close, the next thing is that many people, particularly in ag, say, I want to go out and tell my story, I've been practicing, I've been going out and talking with people about the science behind agricultural, like GMOs or pesticides, and I want to go talk. But the challenge is that you don't necessarily know who you should go talk to. I was getting a tour today, and Lindy was giving me a tour, and she said, here's the line right here, the ag school's over there, and everybody else is over here. You guys are not all that different from many other places, right? So this is a node right here, this is an edge, and those 2 nodes are connected by one edge, but what happens is, you maybe have a lot of people in your one little cluster, and maybe each of those other clusters do, but if you only are connected by one person, then anytime a message goes through there, there's a lot of opportunities for it to be cut off. And another example that I use here is my wife, when we moved to St. Louis, she loves yoga. So she went out and she joined a yoga studio. And when she did, she really found an instructor that she liked, and that instructor said, hey, you know what, Ann, you should go to this farmer's market and this alternative health market. And so then my wife gets connected with them. And then they all have other people that are coming to their stores and shopping in their farmer's market or going to their yoga programs. And my wife brings her friends, and everybody becomes deeply interconnected. The key to you being able to go out and outcompete means is not are you connected within agriculture, but can you find other groups that you can join? For example, how many from you in this ag program are in an environmental group here on campus? How do you expect the students that are trying to go and connect with the environment to know what farmers' perspectives are if you guys don't show up? It's difficult, I know, but this is the way that you become interconnected with others. And getting on to the engineering school and the computer programs and finding people that have questions about agriculture so you can go talk with them. Finally, I guess I have one more section, competition. I want to end by showing you some people that are connecting memes to people in totally new and different ways and trying to spread new ideas that you may find valuable. If you're on Twitter or if you use YouTube, follow them now. This first one over here is a woman named Rachel Loudon. She wrote a book called A Plea for Culinary Modernism. Her book is about how we should not look back on the olden times and think that the French were eating croissants at every meal and that, stone ground bread was this wonderful, wholesome thing, that actually the act of cooking has gotten so much better and we have so much more access to fruits and vegetables and seafood and beef and all of the other products that we have in a way that no other time in history has ever had. The other guy on the other side is Max Roser. He puts out graphs that show how much better the world is getting, how many more people are getting electricity. Anybody here watch The Farmer's Life on Twitter? This is a farmer that, his name's Brian Scott. He'll take a drone and fill up a measuring cup to show how much glyphosate goes on 1 acre, and then he'll fly that drone straight up in the air so that you can see what 1 acre looks like. So you look at just 22 ounces and how much space 1 acre is. Suddenly people that have no connection with agriculture or farms can now say, oh, wait a second, maybe they aren't dousing their fields with chemicals. They're finding new and different ways to do this. The other guy over here, Precision Nerd, this is, the line up there says, the benefits of auto steer. Right? He's holding his baby. Think about what this does to a person living inside of the city on the other side of the mountain. If they imagine that the most wholesome way to grow food is if your farmer is in bib overalls and in a tractor that's open air out in the sun, well then they don't have the experience of saying, look what modern technology allows this farmer to be a family man, to be able to be connected with his family, to be able to spend more time. So we won't know what all the great ideas are that you can show about what your agricultural program is. You have to get out and take these things, because this doesn't happen in a boardroom. It happens with a guy with a GoPro or a camera on their phone. This woman over here, she is an Indonesian woman living in Germany. She's a seed physiologist, and she puts up photos. You can't see it very well, but this is showing what F1 hybrid crosses are. And what happens if you go from F1 and you replant hybrids? That all of a sudden they become other shapes and sizes that you can't predict it. She's taking photos out and showing people science using visual aids. And the other people over here, this is a group of skeptics. They're 2 scientists from the EU named James and Miles. And what they do is they invite scientists onto their program to ask them questions. The person that they have on here is a woman that goes by the name of Mem Somerville, and she talked for an hour about how scientists read scientific papers to know if they're legit or not. These are amazing groups of people that are saying they're these guys here are from the skeptics community connecting with the scientific community. These are disparate nodes that are being interconnected. You can do this too, because as 2% of the population, or less than 2%, you all are very rare. People want to know what's going on in your farms, and they want you to be on their podcasts, and they want you to share photos of your farm. They don't know what it looks like, and if you don't show up to show them, then somebody else will, and their memes will outcompete yours. And finally, I wanted to show you this concept. Has anybody here heard of the Eco-Modernist Manifesto? This is an important concept that I think will spread rather rapidly. There was a group of environmentalists that used to be a part of things like Greenpeace and the Sierra Club, and they were fighting for what they thought was the right way to handle agriculture. And what they did was, over time, they said, wait a second, the science just isn't there. That we can figure out what is the safest way to produce food, or how can we produce the most food in the least amount of land. And so they published a document called the Eco-Modernist Manifesto, where they say, we are going to try and intensify agriculture in small spaces, so that way there's more land for hunting and hiking and fishing and for preservation. Because you can't just create laws to make those things happen. People need to make them happen by outcompeting supply and demand. producing more. And they're not just talking about agriculture, they're talking about energy use and all sorts of things. These are very interesting ideas, and if you're going to show up to an environmental meeting, to a place that you maybe don't feel comfortable in, showing up with new ideas and new ways of thinking is good for you, and it's good for that group that you're joining. I highly recommend it, and if you want a quick tour, this is the guy that leads that organization. His name is Mike Schellenberger, and he gives a great talk. It's about 15 minutes long, and I would highly recommend it. So there are three things that I hope you guys kind of take away from this. If you're going to change the world, you have to understand the shape of the problem. You have to connect with people that want to know what it is that you know. And you have to iterate. You have to just try things over and over and over and over again. Just like Palmer Amaranth. Just keep trying until you find the thing that works to spread your ideas that can outcompete the fear that is spread by the man on the box. So I want to thank you for your time, and if there's still time, if you guys are interested, I'd be open to answering questions about this, or really about anything.
Right, so if you just want to raise your hand if you have a question. Well, I guess first, please join me in thanking Mr. Vance Crowe. So the way we'll do this is if you'll raise your hand, I'll run you the microphone, and before you ask your question, please state your name, and if you're here studying, your year, and what you're majoring in. And if not, if you're just a person, maybe state your position. So with that, we're ready for questions, I think.
Kyle Apley, I'm a sophomore studying chemistry. In the past couple of years, Monsanto has released a campaign asking consumers to join the conversation online. How much participation has Monsanto received, and how effective have they evaluated the campaign to be?
So that's a very good question. That campaign, Join the Conversation, started just before I came to Monsanto. And they started it with a project, a website called discover.monsanto.com, where what they did was they said, anybody can come and ask questions on this website, and we'll answer it. And they also started running ads. Did anybody here see the ads run by Monsanto? I only see them when I'm traveling. I never see them when I'm at home. But they ran them in major markets like San Francisco and New York and Atlanta. And from original market research, it looks like, you guys may not know this, 50% of the US population doesn't know who Monsanto is. They can't name anything about us. They don't know that we're a seed company. They don't have any ill or strong feelings one way or another. And so our research is saying one of the things that thing was designed to do was to go out and say, hey, if you've never heard of us before, come talk with us. And if you have heard of us before, whatever these questions are, you can answer. And I don't have a lot of data, but I think that it's done well enough that they're going to continue to do it on a bigger and bigger scale.
Further questions?
Hi there, I'm Topanga McBride. I'm a sophomore here studying Ag Communications and Ag Econ, and I was lucky enough to see you at the conference this past weekend for AFA. We have looked in my classes at Monsanto in terms of Twitter and Facebook, and we noticed on Instagram you aren't very active. The last post was 10 weeks ago, and pictures aren't on that much. We were wondering just sort of why there hasn't been a focus on Instagram in terms of the other social media aspects.
That's a great question. I don't know, but I do know the guy I should go ask. I think one of the things that probably all of agriculture is wrestling with right now is that my work doesn't sell any more seeds. It doesn't help us get through regulation. It doesn't do anything other than go out and quell fear among the public. And so Monsanto is the first one to make I think, a major investment into reaching out to consumer audiences. And we don't know exactly what to do. And if what we're hearing is we should be on Instagram, I'm certain that they want to use the right investments. But it's hard, and I'm sure that if you guys go to another company, you may find that they're not doing anything at all as far as outreach. Because for every person that you have doing that, that's resources that's going to a person to run an Instagram account that isn't going into seed breeding, or isn't going into, putting bags in the hands of farmers? So it's a good question, and I'll go find out.
Nathan Loud, fifth year senior, still majoring in food science and agricultural communications. So who were the groups, so beyond talking to students, who were the groups that you talked about earlier and that you're trying to target to really get that culture shift to happen and within your position?
So one of the things that in my role that I've said is there's only so much you can do if you're going to do advertising, right? There's only so many people that watch television. There's only so many people that really care what an ad has to say. And so the other strategy is saying, what is it that we can go out and offer people so that they want to hear us talk? So for example, Monsanto chips off a little bit of seeds, right? And then they sequence that genome. And so if you imagine that each genome has 3 billion base pairs, and we sequence 10,000 seeds a day, we're not a big data company. We are the big data company. We are processing through huge amounts of genetic data. So we can now take some of our people that are doing computer coding and graph analysis and take them out and say, look, we're writing code that we want to share. So we're posting open source code and delivering talks at places like Graph Connect. We're also showing up and trying to talk with different environmental groups. We were at South by Southwest Eco a couple of months ago, and these are people that are saying, I want to spend my time and my money to go to a sustainability conference. They are clearly very interested in the environment, and we just go and we become part of the audience and answer questions that people have when it comes up. So we've been thinking about computer and technology people, sustainable agriculture, those types of groups is where we're getting out to.
General Salene, senior in ag business. As we all share our message, such as on Facebook and different things, is there maybe a best way we can do it instead of just going to our friends and saying, hey, that's not necessarily right, here's the true fact. Is there a way we could maybe help our friends realize or come to these realizations on our own rather than just saying, hey, you're wrong?
If anybody has the magic bullet for, how do you respond to the person that's putting a really charged comment on Facebook, it's certainly not me, as I was just in an open Facebook conversation that got lost yesterday. But, one of the things that I've heard said, and I think it's good, is that people will not care what you have to say until they know that you care, right? So when you are talking about Facebook, you're able to go out there and show your values. What is it that you care about? Talking about your family or your farm or whatever the things are that you care about. And when you get into a conversation with somebody and it's not going well, research shows that for every one person you talk with, there are 9 people that watch it. And so if you think about those conversations not as, I want to turn that person that I'm there, but I want to show to the other people that I care enough to listen to what this other person is saying, but that I'm also being totally reasonable and that I'm backing up everything I say with facts and with reason and with some level of caring. And just always imagine that it's not that person that's standing right in front of you, it's the crowd that's standing all around you that you're going to make the biggest difference with.
Savannah Smith, I'm a senior in animal science and political science. And what are we supposed to do when there are some people out there that are totally against us and we will get backlash from them forever and constantly? And I know a lot of people that do not want to stand up and talk about their ag life because of the backlash they get.
In my role, we had to pick where are we going to go. And if you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with Likert scales, 1 to 5, 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree, the people that are on that one side of the scale, the amount of energy that it will take to move a 1 to a 2 or 1 to a 3 is vastly more energy than what it takes to move somebody that's in that 3, that neutral position, to a 4 or a 5. And so what I often think is, you can spend a lot of your energy and then come back and talk with your roommates and call your mom and do all these things because you've gotten so angry, but then you're out of the game for all of those people that are just at the neutral place. But that also isn't very comforting when, you know, the person that's the one is the one that's like, hey, pay attention to me, right? Stay focused, I'm angry. And so in that consolation, the only advice I can give is just be patient and know that anybody that's a one is never going to change in a single conversation. They're going to change in lots of little conversations. But all of the other people around them, you're going to get a lot more value after going after the threes. But I feel like that's not a very satisfying answer.
Jeff Hadachek, a sophomore in agricultural economics. So Monsanto recently laid off about 2,500 employees. Can you talk a little bit about what was the cause of that and what that means moving forward for Monsanto?
So to be clear, what they did was they announced that they were going to be letting go about, not quite that much, but so, you know, Monsanto is a company and they sell seeds to farmers, and those farmers put those seeds in the ground and grow up commodities, oftentimes commodities. And if a farmer isn't able to get returns, right, you know, a few years ago we were getting $7 a bushel on corn, and that's not happening right now. And so markets get tighter, and Monsanto as a company has to respond. I also think that in the life of any science company or tech company, it's a constant iteration where you're saying, these were the skills that we needed at one time in our life cycle, and we're pivoting and getting into other areas. You know, you can often hear our CTO, Rob Fraley, talk about how Monsanto is getting more and more into being a data company, right? The more that we're doing genetics and big data sequencing, we need more of those skills and less of skills that were maybe really valuable even just a few years ago.
Hi, my name is Christine Rock. I'm a sophomore here studying food science, and I actually talked to you briefly at the AFP conference as well, so good to see you again. My question is that I didn't grow up on a farm or have much of an ag background, so when I do get questions concerning certain practices, I don't really know how to answer them a lot of the time. So I guess like one example would be, I have a friend who brought up the point that if seeds from a Monsanto farm or a farmer that uses Monsanto seeds, it blows onto a farmer's crops that don't use it, they aren't allowed to sell the product. Things like that, I don't know how to answer them. So I was wondering if there's an outlet that I could go to or a source I could direct them to if I don't know how to answer.
Sure. So the very first thing that I would say to your comment is, so one time I went, I'll tell a quick story. So I went to Iowa State, and it was the very first presentation that I was going to give. And the audience there got kind of hot with me. They were asking questions. I'd only been with the company for a little while. There was a lot I didn't know. And they felt really unsatisfied because they felt like, you know, you came from Monsanto, we have questions, we want answers. And at one point, I ended up saying, you know, I don't know. And if you'll give me your information, I will go and look this up and find it. And a couple weeks later, I got an email from a student that was there that said, I was really against Monsanto until you told me that you didn't know. And then I realized that you were a person, and I started listening to what you were saying, and I was much more interested in it, and I just wanted to let you know. And that had a big impact on me, because, you know, sometimes you show up somewhere and you think, I have to represent for all of modern agriculture. And I assure you, even the professors in here, even the people that are running our company, agriculture is so complicated that no one knows everything. And you'll earn trust by saying, this is how much I know and how much I can share, and this is what I don't know, but I'd be happy to go look it up. If you want to go look things up, we have a site called discover.monsanto.com, and you can ask questions there and you'll get answers. There's also an industry-funded site called GMO Answers. So if you have questions about GMOs, this is a site where anybody can go and ask a question, and you could ask it at the 6th grade level, and they will give you a reply that somebody at that level can answer. Or you could ask a really sophisticated question, and somebody will give you a really sophisticated answer. There's also a group that is independent called Biofortified, where they answer a ton of questions. It's a group of scientists from Madison, Wisconsin, that decided, hey, there's a lot of misinformation here, and we want to get out there. And then finally, to actually address the question that you asked about cross-pollination, Monsanto has never sued anyone for cross-pollination that's been incidental, that they've tried to, and they've also said in court as an enforceable action, we will never sue someone for cross-contamination or cross-pollination. And so that's one of those memes that's out there that tries to portray Monsanto as this really litigious company, but we do not want to sue our farmer customers. If you sue your customer, they typically don't want to be your customer anymore. And so we really try and avoid that. And so, but that's one of those myths that makes people afraid, because if you believe that there is a company out there that will sue based on the winds that blow pollen, that's a pretty evil company, right? So I'm glad you asked that.
What else do we want to know?
Maybe we'll take one more and then call it a night.
My name is Michelle Keys, and I'm a sophomore in agribusiness, and I come from a strong ag background, and I live just next to Omaha, Nebraska, so all the time when growing up, I would hear people down talking GMOs, and I just want to know the best way to explain GMOs to the average consumer.
So I think the story of GMO cotton is one of the most interesting. And we could take a company like Australia, which grows just huge amounts of cotton. If you're living in Australia just a few years ago, before the advent of GMOs, and you want to grow cotton, every day you are sitting there looking at your plants, looking at your traps to say, have the insects come yet? Because they're going to come and they're going to eat the bolls of your cotton. And so all of that work that you've done to plant them and run them and grow them will all be for naught if those crops get eaten by insects. And so when you do see insects, you fire up a giant diesel engine in a tractor, and you pull behind you a sprayer that goes up and down the fields. And you're talking about thousands of acres spraying it. But when they figured out how to take the spray, which is Bacillus thuringiensis, and allow the plant to grow it by transferring that as a GMO, you went from these Australian farms spraying something like 20 times a year down to 2 or 0. Which means that diesel engine isn't being driven all up and down the field, and all of those sprayings aren't occurring, and all of that time and energy. You suddenly have helped create a plant that can produce another type of insecticide to protect them. And that in and of itself is not releasing as much carbon into the air. And then people will say, but I don't really want a plant that produces pesticides. And that's when I always find that people don't really realize that all of the plants that exist now figured out how to produce toxins that kept insects from eating them. We're just giving them one more tool to produce a protein that makes it so insects can't eat it. Does that make sense? Does that feel good? I think cotton is one of the good ones because when you start with food, people have like a general quick reaction to it, and so it's easier to start with cotton and then start talking about other things. I would be happy to answer questions maybe afterwards, but I wanted to thank you all for your time. This has been a great privilege to be at your lecture series. So thank you.
Make it tonight. Food for Thought will be hosting a viewing of Farmland this Thursday, so if you guys are interested in learning a little bit more about GMOs or other farms, you can come to that. It will be at 6:30 p.m. in Justin Hall 109, and following that, we will have a panel, one with a GMO expert, Dr. Kevin Folta from the University of Florida, as well as a GMO farmer, and then a farmer who chooses to farm without GMO crops. So if you guys want to come to that, we'd love to see you as well, but thanks again for coming.